Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gope Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gope Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivajikacharya Astota Saraswati Śrīmad His Divine Graces Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Se Advaita Gadadhara Siva Sadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Sri Vrindavan Dham Ki, Sri Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki, Sri Purushottam Kshetra Ki, Sri Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Sri Jamuna Mai Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Maharani Ki Jai, Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai, Kantaraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. Oh, glories to the Assembly devotees. Oh, glories to the Assembly devotees. Oh, glories to the Assembly devotees. Oh, glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Oh, glories to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Prabhu Charamani Maheshwaraya Krishna Prasthaya Shani Bhaktivedanta Swami Charamani Namaste Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 5. Lord Rishabhadev's teachings, text number 3. Yeva Maishe Kritasoridata Janeshu Deham Bharavartikeshu Griheshu Jayatmajarati Matsu Napiti Yukta Yavadartascha Loke Yeva Mayishe Kritasoridhata Janeshu Deham Bharavartikeshu Griheshu Jayatmajarati Matsu Napriti Yukta Yavadartascha Loke Yeva Mayishe Kritaso Hridartha Janeshu Deham Bharakvartikeshu Griheshu Jayatmajarati Matsu Napriti Yukta Yavadartascha Loke Eva Mayishe Kritasoridata Janeshu Deham Bharavartikeshu Griheshu Jayatmajarati Matsu Napriti Yukta Yavadartascha Loke Ya Janeshu Deham Bharavartikeshu Griheshu Jayatmajarati Matsu Napriti Yukta Yavadartascha Loke Yeva Mayishe Kritasoridhata Janeshu Deham Bharavartikeshu Griheshu Jayatmajarati Matsu Napriti Yukta Yavadartascha Loke Yea, those who va or Mayi unto me, Ishe, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kritasorida Artaha, very eager to develop love in a relationship of Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya or Madhurya. Janeshu to people. Dehambara vartikeshu, who are interested only in maintaining the body, not in spiritual salvation. Griheshu, to the home. Jaya, wife. Atmaja, children. Rati, wealth or friends. Matsu, consisting of. Na, not. Priti yuktaha, very attached. Who live, yavat artaha, who live by collecting only as much as required. Ja, and loke, in the material world. Those who are interested in reviving Krishna consciousness and increasing their love of Godhead do not like to do anything that is not related to Krishna. They are not interested in mingling with people who are busy maintaining their bodies, eating, sleeping, mating and defending. They are not attached to their homes, although they may be householders, nor are they attached to wives, children, friends or wealth. At the same time, they are not indifferent to the execution of their duties. Such people are interested in collecting only enough money to keep the body and soul together. Purport. Whether he is an impersonalist or a devotee, one who is actually interested in advancing spiritually should not mingle with those who are simply interested in maintaining the body by means of the so-called advancement of civilization. Those who are interested in spiritual life should not be attached to homely comforts in the company of wife, children, friends, and so forth. Even if one is a grihasta and has to earn his livelihood, he should be satisfied by collecting only enough money to maintain body and soul together. One should not have more than one should not have more than that, nor less than that. One should not have more than that, nor less than that. As indicated herein, a householder should endeavour to earn money for the execution of bhakti yoga. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. A householder should lead such a life that he gets full opportunity to hear and chant. He should worship the deity at home, observe festivals, invite friends in, and give them prasad. A householder should earn money for this purpose, not for sense gratification. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmae Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Svayam Rupakada Mahiyam Tadati Svapadantikam Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Langayate Garim Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande Sri Gurum Dinatarinam. Ye va mayi she Krita. Artaha. Right. So, there's a few things that come to mind here. There is a difference between those who are interested in the process of self-realization. And it's interesting that Srila Prabhupada includes the impersonalists in the list of, or amongst the transcendentalists, because in one sense the goal is the same: to establish a relationship with the Supreme. There may be a slight misunderstanding of who the Supreme is, but still the principles of spiritual pursuit, the principles of spiritual practice remain the same for the impersonalists and the personalists, in the sense that, and in what is being emphasized here is the focus, Prabhupada explains, or the Bhagavatam explains, that there are two types of men, just like there are the crows and the swans. And the crows usually inhabit places where there are the rubbish tip, that which is discarded or thrown away as being insignificant or unimportant. That's where the crows hang out. Whereas the swans reside in places where there's water and usually a more beautiful, idyllic, serene environment. And of course, the crows are basically analogous to the people or the persons who are after sense gratification, and as described in the Bhagavatam, chewing the chewed, whereas the devotees or those interested in transcendental or spiritual pursuits reside in an environment where it's conducive to making spiritual advancement, and so the focus is more on sense control, mind control, study of the scriptures, discussions of the Bhagavatam especially, as opposed to novels or magazines or newspapers that discuss the trivial affairs of the materialists, basically. So it's recommended. In fact, Lord Chaitanya says that the first qualification of and this is in yesterday's purport. Asat Sangha Tyag E Vaishnava Achar. So the first qualification or the first quality of a devotee is that they will avoid asat sangha, those who are attached to the impermanent. What is it? Yehi samspasaja bhoga. Yehi samspasaja bhoga. Can't remember any more of that verse. Is it the 6th chapter? 5. Yeah. The devotees don't pursue activities of sense gratification because they know it has a beginning, or pleasure in those things because they have a beginning, middle and an end. Adyantavanta kunteya nateshu ramate buddha. Right? The intelligent. So, associating with the material, what is it Prabhupada would quote? Sangat sanjayate kama. You acquire or you develop the qualities of those who you associate with. If you want to know what is the nature of a person, then see who their friends are, right? And then if you know their friends, then you can understand what the quality of a person is, right? So, if you hang around with the drunks in the park, what will happen? You'll become a drunk in the park. And if you hang around with the sadhus or the saintly persons, then you'll become a sadhu in due course of time by that association. We reflect, like a jewel reflects the light that's shone upon it. So similarly also, a person will reflect the qualities of the people that they associate with, which is very important. Very important. And one of the qualities of the devotees, regardless of which ashram, one of the quotations that I heard recently in the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada saying that all of the ashrams are beneficial, are useful, because the focus is on spiritual pursuits, spiritual life. Right? We shouldn't think that one ashram is better than another, although Prabhupada makes a point that the sannyasis are given more respect on account of their renunciation, the natural renunciation, right? But that doesn't mean that the sannyasis are better than anybody else, or the ashram is better, right? All of the ashrams are encouraged, because each one of them is focused on spiritual advancement, making spiritual advancement, making spiritual progress. The goal is the same, right? So, a qualification or a characteristic of those devotees who are focused, or those individuals who are focused on making spiritual progress in life, is that they avoid the association of materialistic people. Asat sanga tyag, e Vaishnav achar. This is the behaviour of a Vaishnava. And the characteristic of a Vaishnava, of course, is that they want to make spiritual advancement. That's the purpose of life. That's the proper understanding of the purpose of life, is to realise one's identity. And that one is a spirit soul, a servant of Krishna. That's the unique characteristic of all living entities that we have in common, that we're all servants. And instead of being a Godas, servant of the senses, one becomes a Swami, a controller of the senses. And one controls the senses by engaging the senses in the service of the master of the senses, rather than serve the senses and try to seek pleasure out of engaging the senses with the sense objects. One is better served, or one's purposes are better served, if one engages the senses in the service of Krishna, effectively. That way the senses get engagement. Right? Senses have to be, you can't not do anything. Not possible. Well, there are many examples in the histories, in the Puranas, of those who tried to disengage the senses from the objects of the senses. And generally, what did that produce? What does that produce? Frustration. Right? Krishna says, not possible to not act. You will act. So better to engage the senses positively in activities that are focused on spiritual culture, developing renunciation. But the renunciation is, let me engage the senses in Krishna's service. The senses will act, even for a renunciate. Right? Even for a renunciate, one has to be active. And we see that. The examples of action for Krishna, where the results of all of the activities are offered to Krishna, we see those that mood or that objective served by the activities of great personalities like Srila Prabhupada or Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur. There's pictures of Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur riding in a motor car, right, for example. Or Srila Prabhupada even flying in aeroplanes all over the world. This is an aspiration for those who are wealthy and influential to travel and see the... So sure, devotees can travel, see the world, but at the same time their focus is preaching to others. This is our method of self-realization. Our method of self-realization is to preach. Right? Goshti Anandi, not a bhajan Anandi. Well, this was exemplified in Srila Prabhupada, especially Srila Prabhupada's teachings and example. Right? Teachings and example. He didn't just retire to... Although we do see examples of great... like Bhaktivedanta Thakur, in his final years, he went into samadhi, right? And appeared as if a bhajananandi. But if you look at the active years of his householder life especially, right? He was busy, engaged in his occupational duties as a British civil servant. So that's fair enough, isn't it? Right? He was a civil servant, highly placed, magistrate in India in the 1800s was a very powerful position. Just like Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami were in... It's interesting, actually. They gave up their powerful positions and went as renunciates. But of course, as renunciates, they were, instrumental in writing books and they were following the order of Lord Chaitanya, their guru, right? That was their preaching. And Bhaktivedanta Thakur, we see Bhaktivedanta Thakur was fulfilling all of his household duties, but at the same time writing so many books, preaching, collecting money, organising establishment of temples. And in later life took a kind of sannyas, I suppose. Right? Although I think it was more a Babaji Vesh, wasn't it? Bhaktivedanta Thakur. Right? So it's interesting. Applying these principles can be done differently in different time, Kala Desha Patra, time, place and circumstance. And appear to be contradictory. Right? Can appear to be contradictory. So one has to understand the principle or the mood behind their embracing different lifestyles or different ashrams, effectively, at various stages of their lives. But primarily, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness is a movement wherein, if we're following the footsteps of Srila Prabhupada, it's interesting actually, because Prabhupada says here, asat sangachag, but the preacher actually goes out and engages with the asat, right? But engages with them not to participate in their activities, but to give them the positive alternative, right? This is the kind of renunciation encouraged by Srila Prabhupada, and not only encouraged, exemplified by Srila Prabhupada. He demonstrated his renunciation in Yukta Vairagya, which was in the mood of Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur. Use modern amenities, which are ordinarily used by the materialists to pursue sense gratification, not give it up because somebody else misuses it, but rather understand the proper principle of renunciation, in that if something can be used in Krishna's service, even though others may use it for sense gratification, right? Even though it may be used for sense gratification, the proper understanding of renunciation is, give me that and I'll use it for Krishna's service. Like so, aeroplanes and motor cars and printing presses and... what was one of the first things that Srila Prabhupada did in New York in the 1966, I think it was? He made a record, right? Now the whole world at that time was, the internet of the 60s was rock and roll music. Not only rock and roll music, even classical music, the dissemination of ideas was done through the entertainment industry. So Prabhupada comes to America. He sees that people are interested in listening to records. So what does he do? He records the Mahamantra and then distributes it on records, right? Which everybody else is listening to for sense gratification, right? But Prabhupada saw it and he thought, okay, people like to listen to music on records. Let me make a record with the Mahamantra, right? And then, John Lennon and Paul George Harrison got a copy, right? Somehow, George Harrison got a copy, and then started chanting Hare Krishna. But then, when George Harrison met the devotees, then he encouraged them, make a record. Paul McCartney was the engineer of the Maha Mantra. And in those days, the Beatles had a record label called Apple, right? And practically anybody who released a recording on the Apple label went to number one, And so when the Maha Mantra came out, it just took off. And the devotees in London, they were doing tours, like rock stars travelling around, doing tours chanting Hare Krishna. So Prabhupada's, the music industry, the entertainment industry is basically for sense gratification, right? But Prabhupada saw it and encouraged the devotees. Eventually, they stopped touring, but because there's the law of diminishing returns. But at that point, when that recording was made, the Maha Mantra was going all around the world. Right? So Srila Prabhupada and Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur could see the utility of a thing and then use it in Krishna's service. And what others would use for sense gratification, he would use it for renunciation. Very powerful. Prabhupada was criticised for allowing women to live in ashrams. Right? And that was seen by some of his contemporaries, his peers, as being degrading spiritual life. But Srila Prabhupada saw the potency of his disciples. Before Prabhupada sent the devotees to London, he spent weeks with them, training them how to sing the various songs, the Guruvashtikam, the Govindam prayers, or maybe not the Govindam prayers at that point. Could have been. They were sung. They were recorded by George Harrison later on, right? And distributed widely. So Prabhupada spent a lot of time training Jamuna, especially, who had a particularly enchanting voice, how to perform kirtan, right? How to do sankirtan. So Prabhupada saw the potential in, didn't renounce, oh no, we don't want to have anything to do with these women, because he could see, Prabhupada could tell the nature of his disciples. What was one of the first things that Prabhupada did? He's a sannyasi. First thing in 1965, he initiated devotees. Then what did he do the next week? Married them. Yeah, married them. Right? So Prabhupada had a very broad vision of renunciation. And in building a society, building a community of devotees, that's what he was doing, effectively. And for the pursuit, not of sense gratification, right, but for the pursuit of spiritual advancement, spiritual. And you know, the characteristic of those devotees was that they were enthusiastic to preach. Right? And lived very simply, as is mentioned here. If one is a grihasta, he has to earn his livelihood, but he should be satisfied by collecting only enough money to maintain body and soul together. One should not have more than that, nor less than that. Right? And of course, in what is it? Yukta hara viharasya. Yukta. Yukta. What's the next word? Kamasu. Something. Yukta cetasa kamasu. Right? Yukta swapna vabodhasya yogo bhavati dukkha. Right? So, the yukta means balanced in this case. Right? Engaged. Yukta from yoga means engaged or connected. Connected, right? Eating not too much, but not too little at the same time. It's balanced. Because, you know, if you don't eat enough, what happens? You try fasting. What happens when you fast too much? Huh? You get hungry. Or you fall asleep. When I get hungry, got no energy, I go to sleep. And what happens when you eat too much? Same thing. Same thing. You go to sleep. Useless. So to get a balance, not so, it requires a bit of practice. Right? Because, you know, one needs to be centrally strong to preach. You need to be strong. You need to eat, in other words, not. So Krishna recommends in the Gita, be balanced. And so Prabhupada is saying that here also. So, especially for the householders, they need to earn money. Some earn more than others. Right? But they also support, give it to those who are preaching. Right? But interesting here. A householder should endeavour to earn money for the execution of bhakti yoga. Shravanam, kirtanam, Vishnu smaranam, padasevanam, archanam, vandanam, dasyam, sakyam, atmanivedanam. A householder should lead such a life that he gets full opportunity to hear and chant. He should worship the deity at home, observe festivals, invite friends and give them prasad. We've been going to our friend's place. Not sure if we're applying this Yuktahara Viharasya for Diwali. But even we see with the devotees in Mahaprabhu's pastimes, a festival is an opportunity to have a feast, right? It's an opportunity to have a feast. So there's kirtan, there's some some philosophy, there's worship of the deities, Abhishek or whatever, we have Govardhan Puja, we offer a sumptuous feast to Krishna, and then afterwards the devotees take the remnants, and there's a feast. And if you were to look at the devotees at a feast time, you think, these guys are supposed to be into renunciation, but why are they stuffing themselves full of prasadam? Right? But even that is engaged in Krishna's service every now and again, a bit of a feast, right? To engage the senses, engage the mind, engage the senses. And so when you wake up the next day, you feel enlivened, enthused, because you've had kirtan, you've heard the philosophy, you've worshipped, done the puja, and honoured the prasadam in the association of the devotees. And so that's, you know, it's an engagement of the senses, the mind and the senses in activities related to Krishna. And it's the result is purified consciousness. No? Because that doesn't mean we overeat every day. Yeah. A householder should earn money for this purpose, not for sense gratification. So it's okay to have a party, right? Sankirtan party. And cook a feast and offer it to Krishna and then distribute it profusely. Govardhan Puja was the first, Govardhan Puja, it must have been 1976, I think it was. Maybe 77, 76. I tasted my first gulab jamun and samosa. I remember having a samosa. One of my friends went to the temple and came back with this prasadam. And it was powerful. I couldn't work out the gulab jamuns though. That was so sweet. Very, very, very sweet. But people who honour that prasadam, you know, Prabhupada said, we will conquer Australia with prasadam. Right? Harinam, book distribution, prasadam. And you know, people will get a higher taste from that. So, you know, usually feasting is kind of, it's associated with sense gratification, right? But here, we offer the prasadam to Krishna, and then it becomes the gulab jamun becomes then an ISKCON bullet. And, you know, if you eat one of those ISKCON bullets, it destroys your material existence. So, but it's interesting here, Prabhupada says, those who are interested in spiritual life should not be attached to homely comforts in the company of wife, children, friends, and so forth. So what does that mean? We all sleep on beds of nails? No? Or we make sure that the wife and the kids have got a comfortable situation to live in. What do you think? Brajaraj? You all sleep on the floor at your place? Huh? Yeah? Huh?
Service, as a duty.
As a duty. But detached, yeah. We shouldn't misinterpret this and think, okay, now we should all live like Spartans. You know, the Spartans are famous for their harsh austerities. But actually, you know, harsh austerity, even, you know, studying all of the Vedas, you know, these things don't bring bhakti necessarily, they just bring problems, right? And so we're not against a comfortable life, but we shouldn't be attached, like Prabhupada says here, homely comforts. We shouldn't be attached to these things. prepared to accept austerity when it's required, but at the same time, we shouldn't overly punish ourselves. Right? So therefore, balance. Yukta hara viharasya, yukta cetasa kamasu, yukta swapna vabodhasya, right? Yukta, balanced swapna and bodha, which means sleeping and awake, aware, right? Bodha. And that requires a bit of, you know, when we joined the temple in 1978, there were householder couples where the husband was living in the temple and the wife was living outside, living somewhere else. And those women felt abandoned. They were kind of pushed out, right? So, you know, there's a mature and an immature application of some of these principles, right? And and so this is, it's very interesting, isn't it? One should not have more than that, nor less than that, right? So to get that right, that balance. You live with your wife and your family in comfort, but not too comfortable and not too austere, right? Because if you're too austere, you'll get disturbed. And if you're too comfortable, you'll get disturbed. But getting the balance, so that's the, you know, there's that detachment from the materialistic mentality and avoiding that association. But then taking, you know, we have to work, we need to, you know, we need to make money, right? We need money. I mean, you could say you don't need money, but try functioning in modern society without money. See how you go. Huh? But to do that in a way that's detached, but also understanding the utility. That's the degree of renunciation that it needs to be. And we see that even in, you know, people like Srila Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Bhaktivedanta Thakur. Even though the printing presses were used to produce volumes and volumes of literature, newspapers and publications that were supporting the pursuit of sense gratification, a Vaishnava is able to see the essence of something and how it can be used in Krishna's service, and then not reject it just because somebody else uses it for sense gratification. Very interesting. Okay, I think we can finish here. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Priya,
Hare Krishna.
You've got the microphone already.
With regards to Grihastha devotees, they sometimes make really complex plans like investing, and then, for example, they move to the western suburbs and then they want to save up and they want to buy something. Is that okay, or is it too much complication?
I don't know. Yeah, there is atyahara. Atyahara prayasascha prajopo niyamagraha. This is kind of the epitome of asatsanga, right? Over endeavour, prayasas, for endeavouring for things which are difficult to obtain. Yeah, so Prabhupada says here that a householder can pursue making money, but try to avoid too much endeavour at the cost of the hearing and chanting, right? At the expense of one's hearing and chanting. So every endeavour requires some effort, right? Requires some effort. And so what is recommended is the pursuit of business, but in such a way so that it doesn't impede one's making spiritual advancement, right? Just like eating, right? We need to eat, but it's recommended that we don't eat too much, right? You have to eat, but not too much, otherwise you overdo it. And not too little as well. And in fact, you know, in the beginning of a devotee's life, especially in the ashram, we actually encourage them to eat because it's almost the only engagement that a person can become satisfied with when they're restricting everything else. Is that okay?
Prabhuji, Prabhupada purport mentioned about earning our wealth should not be more than necessary or less than necessary. So there is an analogy. So just like we put salt in food, if the salt is too much in food that we cook, then it is like a daha. And if it is too less, no taste. So therefore, just like a salt, so just enough. So more is problem or less is a problem.
Yes, yes. Yep. Anything else? Yeah, our advancement is in reading Prabhupada's books, chanting Hare Krishna, dancing and chanting, feasting and preaching effectively. Okay, Grantaraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhaktivedanta ki jai.